There we go,
Yes.
just press it. There we go.
Okay, but I just would like to fix this for the sake that it is, give me 1 second, because I did not realize I have this date wrong. In the universe today, it is the month of May. It is the 11th. And we have an awesome topic today. I am so excited about this topic because honestly, the more I spent time after James and I prepped this week and worked on the slides and our concept, and I realized I do this every day. Like this talk that we're having today, I do this every single day. You know, like this is really the bulk of what I find that I'm doing on an ongoing basis. So I think we would love everybody to mute, right?
Yeah, I'm going to press mute all now. So,
okay. And then you'll let me back out again.
Yeah, then I can ask you to, there we go, ask to unmute.
Excellent.
There we go. It's almost like we know what we're doing now, which is beautiful.
Perfect. I love it. So again, like I was saying, I love this topic today. I really have to say I live and breathe what we're going to talk about today. It dominates somewhere probably around 75 to 80% of every new patient that walks in my door, because I gravitate, and my attraction to patients is those with autoimmune disorders, pain disorders, brain issues, fatigue, gut problems, hormone issues, you know, and so what I would just say is food and the gut and intestinal permeability are at the seat of so much of what I'm eventually going to manage with these patients that I see. It's either at the beginning of my treatment or it's a part of the sequence or the series of the course. So I honestly can say, if anybody ever asks me, what is the one thing you do with every patient? Honestly, I start with a KBMO, because I believe in my approach, belief in my observations in 25 years of clinical practice, food makes all the difference in the world. And the results I get with my KBMO report, and then the secondary insight, helps guide me into the pieces and patterns of immune, GI, microbiome, permeability, pathogen management. You know, I really love the way KBMO for me will help me set up a food plan for my patients going forward and give me the guidance to rule in or rule out pathways that are already a part of my clinical decision tree. So James, I'll let you kick off. Let everybody know you guys offer them some awesome specials for spending time with us. And I highly encourage everybody to do a kit if you haven't yet.
Just flip back onto the last slide, and I'll just kind of give them a bit of a forewarning of what's going on. So again, hopefully most of you got to listen last month, which was May the 11th. Well, sorry, not May the 11th. It was about April the 11th.
14th.
14th. As Kristi and I said, that was a quick month. So again, we're back here again, which is great. And then coming up, as Kristi said, we're going to go through gut health and gut barrier. And then we're going to talk about some case studies next month. As I said, when we introduce Kristi, one of the things I love about her is she's running the test. So again, it's not just a talking head going, oh, this would be a good person to kind of sign up. It's someone who's got a lot of experience. So again, the idea is to kind of keep imparting that to you and hopefully kind of get some questions back in from you. And then the last one, I think, which would be really exciting, is Ask Dr. Kristi. So she's a bit nervous. She's going to be put on the spot. But I said, between her and me, I am confident we'll be able to answer any questions that we've got. So that's that. And then if you just click it on one more, Kristi. Again, as ever, we're kind of offering a discount to everyone to try the test. Again, what we found with many providers is it's really helpful if you've gone through the process, you've got the test results back, you've got your meal plan, you've got your app, so then you can share that with your patients. And who knows, there may be some hidden kind of mystery things going on with your health as well. So the idea is, let's make sure we cover that off, and then we'll see how that goes as well.
And then can I just say, in the light of, we're going to talk about some new things today, what's coming in the test kits and the availability of the LPS. You were mentioning that the new up-leveled test with the new markers will be here after June. So I'm just throwing it out there since we're already halfway through May. Is it okay for them to order, wait, and do the new kit, or will they get the new test?
If they give it another week or so, again, by the time they've ordered, again, send it in towards the back end of May, then we'll make sure all of the ones that have Kristi on them, we'll make sure we include the LPS. So you guys will be first to get access to the LPS that we'll be talking about as we go through this.
Perfect. And then what I would say is ideally in my perfect mentoring world, I do a lot of mentorship groups. I love teaching my peers from, those in functional medicine, practitioners, nutrition professionals, and collaborative teams with coaches. I do a lot of mentoring. And what I would say is I have run big groups of people through KBMO profiling that are on the side of the stethoscope that we all sit on. And it's an amazing conversation to have. So I would advocate for everybody to, if you're planning to do a test, have it in your hand. And when you come to the July 13th event, when we're doing the Ask Dr. Kristi and Ask James, have your kit there. And it would be really awesome to be able to kind of share and compare. And I use that session, not only for your questions, but let's make it relevant, and it'd be lovely if you had your own test results back. And my experience with my many, many, many patients who we run through KBMO, whether it's a direct order that we direct ship out, sometimes I believe Britta sends through Rupa, right? We either are direct with you, she organizes, we predominantly, I'd say the majority of the ordering that we do for our patient kits comes out of the Nutridyne warehouse where the bulk of our private label and our supplements get shipped. We use a couple, kind of big warehouses. Nutridyne is our lead. We use FullScript. We dabble with a bunch of other companies that are not under the same roof. And so we order our KBMOs through our Nutridyne account, which is wonderful. So we can send a protocol, a treatment plan, send out our kits for KBMO, and they all come out of the same warehouse, and they're really, really fast. So just giving you the heads up, we usually get results back in about 3 to 4 weeks maximum. So we've been really happy with the return on that time frame. And so the faster I get the kit in my patient's hand, the faster I'm going to have the results in front of my screen. So do take your time, kind of plan ahead. That gives you 8 weeks. Which is me advocating, saying, totally get that test done the last week of May or early June, so you can have your test results in your hand when we're getting a chance to meet together coming up in July.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just springboard as a reminder. Last month, when we started down this journey together, we were stepping back to identify what are the different ways that we define how our immune system may respond or behave around foods. And so foods that it is sensitive to or intolerant to or challenged by or reactive to will come through different IG expressions or immunologic communication. So we, again, redefined there's a difference between allergies, sensitivities, and intolerances. And one of the nice things that this profile with KBMO offers is it's bringing us an advanced look, an advanced dive into the food sensitivity category, which those of us who are dabbling or working fully in an integrative functional nutrition-based practice, most of us in that space are already working on the gut, the immune system, and looking to specify food and food reactions. So again, as a reminder, these are the types of things that we see in a root cause care practice. When people come in with these types of symptoms and challenges, we're thinking food. Right? We're thinking, what is at the source? What are some of the ways that these food sensitivities could express themselves in our patient's unique distribution? And it can come through the pattern of different types of clusters and waves. So we are building off of that knowledge. And today I'm not only going to talk a little bit with James, about how the kit will guide you into this journey of understanding what's coming out of the structure and function of that intestinal tract. But we're also going to go on and start to plant seeds for how do we start thinking about cases. So next time we're going to dive into cases. Today, we're just going to kind of dance around cases, and I'm going to share with you the methodology that I tend to go into with all of my teaching, training, and mentoring when I'm having practitioners learn kind of from the beginning or the ground up how to build a nutrition-based protocol. I detest the word protocol as a starting point because I prefer to do personalized patient care. But in the structure of producing a plan for a patient, there's definitely a method to the madness for me. And so I'm going to share with you how I build that nutrient plan. And I can tell you it is starting in the gut. And it is starting with the data and the knowledge that I am looking to collect from my KBMO sample. Right. So I want to know specifics about food. And as we talked about last month, and we're going to go into in depth today, it's that permeability that I'm looking to identify where there's challenges. Because if we see leaky and inflamed small intestinal cells and that intestinal mucosa is starting to pull apart, creating that level of permeability, that becomes a fueling source for downstream challenges in absorption, nutrient uptake. We see mis-signaling patterns, miscommunication that starts to take place with sort of the paradox of the immune system, where you become more autoimmune against your own tissues, while your defense seems to go down and you're more reactive and capable of picking up other infections, right? So you get hyper responsive to your own tissue, but less reactive sometimes to the outside world and things that you should be red flagging and saying, hey, yeast, you don't belong here. This candida shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have this parasite on board, or these bacterial distributions are growing a garden full of weeds instead of a beautiful flower garden, right? Or a wildflower garden. So what I love about our topic today is I literally am doing this every day with patients in my office, and I'm trying to figure out in their history, their story, what's triggered the damage for the intestinal tract. And I find that being able to use this sort of jump point of this kit and the test results as an opportunity to spring forward with clean diet, reduced inflammation, change some of those potential damaging effects that are upregulating that immune system's response, I'm able to be able to sort of shave off a whole layer of inflammation that's coming through from food triggers. So James, I could seriously talk for like 8 hours on this topic. So I'm going to pause for a minute and kind of give you an opportunity to spring forward. In the old days, our KBMO test would offer us the complement and IgG4 results. Then the testing has moved forward to give us these very helpful markers that we would look at as extenders of the quality and the integrity of the gut barrier. And so kind of let's talk about that sequential evolving clinically. And then today we'll kind of anchor the lab conversation around the new LPS, which is the whole reason I'm advocating for them to order their test at the end of the month so they can get the new
exactly. So this one's just a great slide, and this one you can really share with patients as well. Again, they'll often say, well, I think I can get one of these things online. I don't think I need to get it from you. Well, there's two things about that statement. A, we deal direct with providers, as I always say, because again, this is a good test that turns into a great test when it's in the hand of a provider who can see the whole picture versus partially the picture. And so what this slide is showing them is that on the left-hand side, you've got the IgG only testing, and that's the things like Everlywell or kind of US Biotech. Nothing wrong with those companies. They're great companies. The reality is, though, the limitation is that pathway, because you're only telling them what they're exposed to. Whereas on the right-hand side, you have our patented approach, as Kristi mentioned, which is looking at multiple pathways. And the reason it's so powerful is you're looking at the whole immune system. So you're not looking at half of it, which you're doing with just the IgG. So you add the innate immune system as well. And so that's really helpful in terms of understanding how that works. And so what we find is that double screen of, okay, what are you exposed to? But then more importantly, what's causing your innate immune system to get triggered through inflammation is what we really gives us that differentiation and gives us that pattern, and then simplifies the results to make it actionable for you, the provider. So that's really the big kind of takeaway from this thing. A good example of IgG versus complement in terms of type testing. I ran an Everlywell. I had 20 foods elevated. When I ran the FIT test, I had 5. So that's a good indication of how this test kind of separates the wheat from the chaff, as it were. Probably wheat's not a good idea given all our love of gluten on this.
Considering how many gluten sensitivities come through.
But the idea is to say that you've got 20 there versus 5. So again, from a compliance standpoint, that's really helpful for clients as well. Kristi, back to you.
No, it's great. And so again, I probably spent at least 15, if not close to 20 years, I would say, running different companies' IgG4 panels. Really helpful, right? Because when you have that kind of data, you're basically using that to see in an indirect way, are we seeing a leaky gut, right? So we knew, early on that it wasn't so much that our patients had to be extremely strict with the IgG4 results as much as we wanted to know, were there 3 to 5 or was there 40 foods coming through, right? And again, that lack of specificity or confidence in being able to translate that into clinical practice has certainly elevated with the ability to look at the complement-induced inflammation insight. So again, looking at the ways that we're targeting the immune system's response patterns, we find that this does give us a much better clinical relationship and understanding of how and why the immune system is reacting. And we know that foods can be damaging. Chemicals, meds, drugs can be damaging to that gut lining. Pathogens can be damaging to that gut lining. And many of us are dabbling in looking at stool samples, looking at PCR testing, looking at different types of antibody testing. So often when we're diving down into the gut and we're going into the tube, we're really looking at foods, trauma, what's triggering trauma? Do we have structural problems there? Do we have functional problems there? And what's going on with the bug story, right? What's happening with the garden or that microbiome? So, it is certainly absolutely the perfect parallel explanation to be able to say, yeah, chicken or the egg, right? Because you eat foods that you have sensitivity and challenges from, which is why we call them food triggers, that damage the gut lining for many people. The damaged gut lining creates the intestinal permeability. The more intestinal permeability you have, the more food exposure that you get and the challenges with digestibility. And that becomes basically like the chicken or the egg vicious cycle, right? So those of us who are ending up seeing patients who are in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, and this has been going on since they were a child. For many patients, they've come to us where unfortunately some of the antecedents or predisposing factors or the things that set them up for these challenges that are now popping up in their adult life or their transition years, they rarely came on at that point. There's been this underlying factor for quite some time. And amazingly, that whole first year of life really is an important part of our story. So we've got some great new resources in these tools, right? We can now go on and we can look at degradation, we can look at protein release, and we can get a good sense for if we're dealing with a candidal or a yeast-like related problem with pathogens in the gut. So that evolution was wonderful, right? And now, do you want to speak, if you don't mind, James, on the capability of the tests to include this now too?
Yeah, and so again, if you think of leaky gut, it's really a continuum. And so again, rather than just saying it's one magic mark, if it was, then we probably wouldn't still be debating how all these different things work. But the reality is it's a continuum. And so what we wanted to do was develop the best test possible. So again, all the best panel. And so if you think about the FIT test, it clearly shows that we weren't satisfied with just IgG. We did the IgG plus the complement. And with zonulin, it was really the same. We wanted to put the best team together of our very own Dr. Brent Dorval alongside Dr. Alessio Pisano and say, look, we've been running a zonulin test. It's been having some issues. It doesn't seem to be picking up or linking clinically as it should. And so what are some of the kind of implications, or what are some of the reasons around that? And so talking to Alessio and then also reviewing the literature, what we saw that it was cross-reacting with haptoglobin and properdin. We were seeing a number of issues coming up. So what we did is put that team together 4 years ago to develop an assay that would be kind of best in class to match our food sensitivity. And that's really what we've done. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But the idea was, let's make sure we give you a test that's based on good science. And that's really what we did. So if you're looking at this slide, we had the zonulin test, but rather than just stopping there, we wanted to put a bit more kind of meat on the bones, as it were. So how did we do that? The candida, as Kristi's mentioned, the zonulin and the occludin. So Kristi, you can talk about that, and we can go backwards and forwards in terms of how to interpret it as well, but love to get your input on it.
Yeah, and I would say just kind of, I love the extension of this because we did have access to looking at the candida response or reaction on the first page of the test with the rest of the foods in the beginning, right? And then there's now been this extended capability of looking at the secretory IG response. So we're again stepping over to say, well, what also could we say could be going on inside of the gut barrier specifically? In general, I tend to somewhat explain or highlight for the patient that if I'm seeing a tag flag positive in that first column where we're looking at our array of IgG1 through 4s and our complement, then I'm really thinking that there's a systemic pattern. There's a possibility that maybe the skin or migraines, headaches, edema, swelling, joint pain. I'm thinking about some of those peripheral and more extended secondary problems could be represented in what I'm seeing in my lab, right? It's going to have me kind of dig deeper or think in that pathway. When I see that secretory IgA lighting up more positive, I'm thinking about the levels of reactivity being recognized, from within that gut mucosal lining itself and the activity of the immune system that resides there. And so, looking at the pattern, what am I really looking for? Any candida. Am I seeing any candida at all? If I see any candida positive, I'm going to go after it. If I have a double positive, I'm going to dig even deeper and may go on and say, look, let's explore mycotoxins and mold and your environment and what else might be setting you up for a yeast-like pattern, right? So across the board, sort of candida for me extends, you know, not only through the nasal passageway and all the way down through the gut and into all the little cracks and creases, but I want to be thinking about how might that represent an environmental problem if my patient happens to be located or positioned in a water damaged home or working in an old building, you know, where they don't even realize there's mold in the ductwork or, you know, in the area that they're exposed to 40, 50 hours a week, right? So I look through this lens of exploring candida through also my functional medicine lens of sort of stepping back and saying, I know that candida byproducts poison the mitochondrial's performance. They literally damage the capacity of the mitochondria to make energy. So when I'm seeing candida problems or patterns, I'm immediately going to start thinking functionally about mitochondria, detoxification needs, the environment. I'm going to be thinking about if they're pooping every day. You know, we can't have patients with SIBO and candidiasis constipated or with a stagnant, you know, bowel pattern. So I love that I can now get a little bit more of an expanded viewpoint on this profile to know, yeah, candida or no candida. Can I rule it in? Can I rule it out? And do I need to keep it on my list? And then that turns us over into the whole conversation about the leaky gut and the permeability, right? So I love the way you described it as a continuum, because that's a perfect analogy, right? To be able to see, right? And so the progression of an intestinal permeability pattern, you know, comes to the point of when do you catch it? When do you find it? Are we already at all 4 red blocks lit up? And then our mission is to reverse it and turn things back the other direction, right? And so sometimes from taking the history and knowing that you have a patient that's already been working on their gut and digestive system for 2, 3, 4 years, you know, if just one of these light up, you know, I start to think about us catching them on the reversal, right? Because they've been working on something. And as these markers come down, 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 and there's less clinical demonstration and less laboratory confirmation, you know, that things are lighting up red, I am so grateful because it helps me and the patient go, yes, we're like 50% better or 75% better than we were a year ago. So I am a huge fan of repeat testing somewhere around 6 to 12 months, depending on the need with the patient. I'm very conscious about spending their money and the time frame. And so if they are all in and doing really well, I may go back and just reorder the gut barrier panel. I don't necessarily go back and repeat the entire FIT 176 with all the foods unless my patient, money's not an issue and they're requesting it, right? There is going to be a point where I want to see that, but man, I love that this gut barrier panel is available alone for checkups on the patient.
Yep. Totally agree. And I think that's one of the things we've tried to do is, like, you know, it's probably unusual for a lab to say this, but our view is let's isolate this piece on its own, because to your point, if you're going to retest in 6 months, you want to make sure, you know, we're aware of cost and make sure that it's available for everyone. And that's what we've tried to do with a lot of these tests, is to make sure it's very, you know, easily available for as many people as possible.
Absolutely love that piece. So I use it a lot. So when talking with the lab results with patients, I really want them to get a good sense and understand that when we see the zonulin cross reactions coming through, we know that this correlates back, as we have seen in Fasano's work, this comes back to us having to ask the hard questions. What's damaging the lining of the intestines? What's causing the break, the fracture, the permeability challenge with these tight junctions? And so when we see these proteins released inadequately, inappropriately out into the bloodstream, and the immune system is saying, wait a minute, you don't belong here, zonulin. This is not where you belong, right? We then get to start asking the questions, what's the trigger, right? Because this is like a stamp in time letting us know this is part of the problem. Now our job as the medical detective, honestly, is to say, why? Why do we have elevated zonulin levels? Yes, it's food, but how about stress? How about food reactions? Do we have genetic predispositions we need to be mindful of? Is it the wrong foods? Is it the wrong microbiome? Is it the wrong fermentation system? Are there pathogens? Are there bugs? You know, there's this checklist, right, that we're going to go back to in a functional model, which is, I think, one of the beautiful things that zonulins come out to model and support the functional medicine approach, because now we have a trackable way of identifying associated patterns with the cascading waves of different types of autoimmune problems, right? I mean, this is like a couple years old, but I remember last reading the stats where they had identified and labeled, you know, like 148 different autoimmune conditions, right? And that number is continuing to rise. So obviously this represents the big ones that we tend to see: neurodegenerative, obesity-induced, celiac, arthralgic patterns. I mean, the list goes on here for looking at inflammatory bowel disease. But what a beautiful opportunity to track and test, because so many patients they're seen in immunology, rheumatology, they're seen by a gastroenterologist, and they're being told that their symptoms aren't going to get better. Yeah. Right. And so when you say, look, if we can get your diet squared away, get you off your inflammatory foods, get your vitamin D levels up, dial in your good oils and your essential fatty acids, and just do the fundamentals of nutrition 101 here. We're not even talking about the fancy stuff. Can we just get a sense, right, of getting you off the foods that your immune system is struggling with and on those healing aids that will keep your immune system functioning well and gentle in its communication? It is incredible to watch the reversal of autoimmune disease, right? And that's not even on the table for many endocrinologists, rheumatologists. They don't see it. They don't see antibody levels coming down in that way. And this food plan for me has been absolutely imperative for helping people reverse an autoimmune trend, right? Whether it's fully expressed or they are in a preclinical space, or they've actually developed a preclinical syndrome where we've got multiple biomarkers. This is one of the most important things that I'm going to be working on: the permeability, the gut response, and foundational nutrition, because it underlies all of the autoimmune patterns that we're working with.
And the nice thing, I think, when you think about zonulin as well, it's one of those markers which is really more talking about overall health, because you look at that long list of disease states. Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, it's pretty much a marker for health. And so I think that's the neat thing with zonulin. And it's one of the few that's reversible. And as you say, that helps the patient when you see those results, when you see that reverse. That's very possible with this. And that's the nice thing about it in terms of, and that's why we target it to start with. How do we look at a marker that may be reversible? Again, no one wants to say, oh my gosh, the doc's telling me my cholesterol levels are elevated again. Whoopie-doo. I can't change that, or it's very difficult for them to change it. Whereas zonulin, you know, working with the right provider, again, you can help change that in terms of help to heal the gut. And that's a big addition there. And so on here, we're just really showing some of the limitations that we were seeing when we first got involved in zonulin in terms of the cross-reactivity with the haptoglobin and properdin. Again, we were, and everyone else in the market was seeing a very low level of positivity with zonulin. It wasn't gelling with clinical symptoms. So that cross-reactivity was part of it. Again, everyone was looking at a protein assay. We've developed an antibody assay. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to make sure it was stable, because the protein assay was being different results in the morning from the afternoon. So again, our view was, let's make a stable assay. It's not cross-reacting. And then the third one here is sample type. And so again, I kind of went at this and said to kind of Alessia, I said, look, which sample do you think is the best one? Because again, if we're going to develop this test, I don't want to come off and say, oh, we got the wrong sample type when we kind of launch it. So he said to me, all my seminal research has been done in serum. So on that basis, that's why we've stuck with blood. So I think over time, zonulin has been one of those markers that's been kind of like almost an add-on when you do those stool tests. Whereas, again, I think it's really important to kind of reiterate that point. If Alessio Pisano, who discovered zonulin, says all his work is done in blood, I think that should be, again, that's not James saying that, that's Alessio. Yeah. So again, it's good enough for him. It's definitely good enough for me. Yeah. And so again, that's really the key things that this test has really dealt with. We've eliminated that cross-reactivity. And again, having the brains of someone like Dr. Dorval, who invented the first rapid HIV diagnostic, working on this alongside the kind of information and knowledge that Dr. Alessio has on this topic has enabled us to come up with the right recombinant zonulin protein, which has enabled that zonulin assay to be created. Again, what we now see is a positivity rate more in the 15 to 20%, and that really mirrors the data that Dr. Alessio had published in the Lancet in early 2000s. And so that's why we think we're on the right page on this one. It's mirroring the early research that was also done in a lab with, again, not a commercially available or viable assay. This is what we've done. We've taken that early research and now created something which is really commercially available and enables us to run it off the finger stick and the blood draw, which I think is really critical to how we've developed this test.
Yeah, absolutely love and appreciate the ease of being able to do this test, right? And not having to send the patient in for a phlebotomy. You know, it is absolutely wonderful to be able to do it with the patient in the office at that point, right? It's a really great practical implementable tool, which is wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about occludin. If you want to maybe open up the conversation about how it is that you discovered or determined that this as a biomarker was going to also help, and I like how you've said it, touch the continuum, right? Or that continuum progression of permeability challenges.
Well, and it was kind of relatively straightforward on the basis, if you think this is really a good way of looking at those tight junctions, zonulin is an outstanding way of working out how are they functioning. So almost the oil of the tight junctions in many regards. How are they kind of opening and closing as they should on a regular basis? And so when you look at occludin, it's almost the next level because it's really telling you what's going on from a structural standpoint. So that band that holds them together, perfect, to use that slide, is that still intact or has that come apart? And then at that point, that's when you see that elevated level of occludin. So in essence, it's almost like a level 1, level 2, level 3. You've got level 1 as the candida in terms of early stage dysbiosis, as you were talking about. Level 2, the zonulin, which as we talked about is a reversible marker. And then occludin in terms of, is there any structural damage? And if there is, then again, we need to know about that so we can treat accordingly. And I think that was really the kind of genesis of why we came up with those 3 markers. And as you see it now is on the panel and on the report. So again, one of the things that, you know, I keep hearing from people is, you know, what we love is that this is a 3-page report. And I've heard the kind of misery down the Zoom call from providers. You've had, oh my God, someone sent me a 58-page report. Again, we're not trying to build our part here. The idea is there's some great science behind it. We want to make sure it's accessible to as many people as possible. And so keep it easy, keep it interesting so that the patient has a brief description of what you're testing them for. So the idea is we want them to be part of this journey. And importantly, again, another kind of thing that we've just worked on at the moment is what we say is if any of the 6 markers are positive, we recommend to consult your provider with regards a good gut healing protocol. And so we've worked with Nutridyne, Biotics, and Nutritional Frontiers on that. And we're really excited that we're about to get that launched on FullScript as well. So that'll make it even easier for you guys to have access to this and share that with your patients. So the idea is that's the kind of next generation of, again, we're rightly or wrongly continuing to evolve to make sure that we can make it as easy for your patients and you as the providers to give them access to those gut healing protocols. So again, that's one of the next steps that we've done. We're really fortunate that Dr. Glad, who's the CSO of FullScript, he is also a big user of KBMO. So again, he and I were at a conference recently, and again, it's nice to kind of get a shout out from the CSO of a great organization like that. And again, just another example, you know, of one of the great providers that we have running this test.
I think it's great. I mean, honestly, I would say I give 99% of my business to FullScript and Nutridyne, right? And they're just so professional. And it is such a wonderful add-on to be able to drop into the lab opportunity, right? Because so many of us are ordering KBMO because we have a nutrition-based practice, because we're already going to be correcting and working on issues with nutrition and nutrition deficiencies. And honestly, I have been so impressed with the guide and the aid of looking at some of the ingredient lists that you've added in the last year and a half as well. You know, vanilla, turmeric, you know, kind of looking at the common ingredients that I see, my fish oil, right? Cod, salmon, sardines, you know, kind of looking at that link with calamari or squid, right? And so it's like when I'm picking my way through different oils, through different nutritional formulas, or maybe the patient's choosing between their beef isolate for muscle growth and recovery, and we want to know chocolate or vanilla, right? Honestly, we go back to the KBMO and I tell the patient always, be thinking about these sections, because these are navigatable points of interest to you when you're making decisions about not only what you're eating, but how you're choosing your various different supplements, if that's a part of your practice, right? So I love that addition. You know, when that grew in the last couple of years, I thought, oh, this is so great. And honestly, things like stevia and monk fruit, they are in a lot of the formulas I'm touching, especially when I'm using functional foods. And I'm going to navigate my way into making different clinical choices based on the results that I'm getting here. So I know we kind of sort of dripped in last week that the LPS is coming, that those who are waiting and submitting their updated tests at this wonderful price of $200, which I think maybe I can do this too, right? I would like to get an updated test with this LPS in it. And so what I think is great is now we can say candida, yes or no, systemic gut-based, leaky gut, how progressive is it? And our next step is saying, hey, are we really potentially seeing some true bacterial endotoxins? Are we seeing byproducts of a SIBO or a more progressive microbiome distortion, in that we would also have the capacity to understand that gut infectious state a little bit more carefully with the addition of the LPS. So talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about what does KBMO want us all to know about this additional add-in. And I'm just thrilled that, again, same test. I'm not yet ordering a second test.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the big things here. What we're trying to do is give you a really good first line screen for all these patients. So you're not kind of overwhelming them with too many tests. You say, let's do this. We'll have a great idea of what's going from a leaky gut, and obviously overall immune health, given the link with the gut, as we talked about up front, and then obviously inflammatory response of the sensitivity. But the neat thing, I think, with LPS, as you mentioned, it's linked to all those gram-negative bacteria, which is a key thing to kind of check with your patients. And as you highlighted some of those key points there about the endotoxins. But the other key marker there, as you see here, extremely strong stimulator of the innate immunity in humans. Who is got the only test that measures the innate system? That's the KBMO with the C3D. So all these things begin to pile on in terms of making sense of going, you know, there was a great provider who I spoke to recently from a place called, which I'm going to butcher, called Chagrin Falls. And she said to me, what I love about this test is you're measuring the whole immune system rather than half of it. And so again, that innate immunity that we pick up through LPS again is another great way of working it out. And then of course, the classical brain-blood barrier. So that's another key element with LPS. So again, that is alive and well in terms of the two brains. Is it the gut or is it the brain, which is the number one? So the idea here is by adding LPS, it gives you a much better sense of what's going on from a gram-negative bacteria standpoint, what might be going on with the innate immune system. And again, that whole, you know, gut and brain kind of connection that is very strong. And again, is coming out more and more in the literature. So let's include that on the test to give you a really good sense of what's going on. And what we always hear is with leaky gut and gut permeability, it's an increase in endotoxins. That's why we want to include LPS in our panel. And to be fair, we heard it from the market. So we heard it from some of our providers going, geez, it'd be great if you could add LPS. So again, it's taken us 6 months, but that's all right. We're improving in our speed and turnaround, given it took them 4 years to do the zonulin. So again, what I'm hoping is, you know, the Moore's law of diagnostic testing is alive and well, and we're kind of speeding that up as fast as we can.
Yeah. You know what I also love about having LPS on the future tests coming through is because sometimes the patient's looking at it and saying, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And what I am excited about is, you know, normally at that point, I'm ordering a stool culture. I'm going on to look deeper at the microbiome, and I want to know more about the bacteria and the yeast and parasitic involvement. But I love the fact that, like, right there on the spot, I will have a yes or no to at least answer that question around byproducts of gram-negative bacteria. I mean, how wonderful to be able to say, well, this is part of your story. I don't know if it's your whole story yet, but I know that it's a part of your story, right? Or to be able to sort of park that and say, no, let's now talk about your stress. Let's talk about your foods. Let's talk about your sleep. Let's talk about your relationships. Let's talk about your sense of safety, right? Because all of those things will impact the integrity of the gut, right? It is not just your diet and it's not just your food. So I really like that it gives me permission to start to explore some of those areas. So the graphic is beautiful because I think it really does shine the light on when we've got the presence of lipopolysaccharides present, like which areas of the body respond to that, right? And it is, I think, one of the biggest breakthroughs in functional concepts that we're seeing in the conventional literature and conventional mindset today, which is that which starts in the gut has a systemic effect, right? And I've been in practice for 25 years. And I mean, it's like the staple of all naturopathic functional medicine practices, but it is so amazing to start to see sort of this wave of the constellations connecting and the story of psychoneuroimmunology starting to unfold, and the link that the gut plays inside of all of it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's hardly a tissue that's not impacted, by those biotoxins. Right. And so what else might you want to say or add to our conversation about LPS?
Just that. And the thing that you're highlighting on the end there is that brain gut again. So again, I think that's the key element with this test. And now adding this, you're really getting to see, which is what's going on. Is it just in an inflammatory response, or is there something going on from an immune health standpoint as well? Or looking at that brain barrier as well. So I think we're seeing already stories from providers who say, wow, we had this patient who was very anxious, came up very highly on this test in terms of from a gut barrier panel. We're seeing stress related issues as well. And one, I remember talking to a provider a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying, look, she was so stressed in terms of eating the right things, going on the right protocols. And she was like, I don't know what's going on. And then I said, well, what other markers are? She said, well, my cortisol is very high. I'm like, and that's why you're seeing all of these markers coming up in terms of your gut barrier panel. So I think, to your point, Kristi, it really opens up the discussion you can have with your patient population, where if I just had the food sensitivity test, you might have missed that. But when we started talking about what else it might be linking into, it was fascinating to hear. And she went, oh, now I think about it in those realms, that makes exactly perfect sense. Yeah. So that's where I think this really is a powerful tool to adding just to the food, just to the inflammatory responses that we were talking about before.
Right. And speaks to the power of binders, right? And using different things like chlorella or charcoal or certain fiber bases, and ways of using serum bovine immunoglobulins, right? And being able to use some of these tools to grab onto the bacteria, the LPS byproducts, pull them out of the gut. I mean, what a great combination, right? Because how fascinating to know that we can change some of the impact on neurology and brain performance by sopping up this stuff in the gut. Right. And it goes back to, gosh, right, some of the 4 leaders in the whole field of functional medicine, Leo Galland, and, kind of going backwards, and we're literally seeing, in the 80s and 90s, these conversations around, well, what if we used binders, and what if we pulled toxins out of the gut? What kind of an effect is that going to have on the rest of your system? Right. And so here we are, right? 20, 30 years later, these fields have evolved from core concepts, really leveraging observations in practice between the gut and the system. And now we have the language and the testability to be able to say, yep, I think the challenges with speech or focus or concentration or memory for this patient potentially are looking back at the gut-brain connection. All right, so gosh, the beauty of the guts, looking at the guts, right? And looking at all the activity and the action that's taking place there. There's no question, LPS identification is such a valuable part of clinical management, because we know it is kind of the master commander, if you would say, of setting off these waves of inflammation in the system, and the destruction and the challenge, that we see inside of the microbiome. Right, so I will kind of give you a moment to sort of speak to what we're seeing in the way LPSs are absorbed out into the system, transported, and how they move around the body and can cross-contaminate or cross-inflame other areas. I'll give you the stage.
Okay, and then if you click onto the next one, you'll see there's a kind of summary of this. And again, we'll send these slides out. But again, the beautiful thing with LPS is, again, it's that increased endotoxemia and increased inflammation. And if you think about what our reasons for being, the food inflammation test, now again, this is a great kind of segue into why LPS is so important, with that increased inflammation as well as endotoxemia, as we talked about. So again, all these things that Kristi's talking about, and again, these slides will be available for you. I challenge any patient to see that slide and go, actually, I think I want one of those green spiky things coming through after all. Right. So again, hopefully it'll be a good one to show them and say, now I think I'm beginning to understand what you're talking about when we talk about the leaky gut as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, last week I kicked us into this whole conversation. Sort of part of the kickoff conversation was, when I'm taking the clinical data and bringing it back into the office and starting to make some decisions about how to move forward with the patient's care, I'm always using a root cause approach. Whether you want to call it naturopathic, integrative, functional, they're all meaning that we observe the patterns of dysfunction and clinical success. We look for health, we look for wellness, and we identify where things are not performing optimally. And that can be in our level of peak performance and fitness, in our body's ability to recover and repair, in our immune system and our inflammatory system to defend the host and control irritation, and then the capacity to detoxify, shed, eliminate, remove, biotransform, conjugate, etc. And so there's all these important aspects of our physiology that we're looking to see from a functional root cause perspective. And underlying all of that is the quality of the soil, how well we nourish and nurture our roots. And those roots are the lifestyle factors. So I'm observing up into the branches and I'm looking very carefully. And I'm in this particular situation, when I see gut dysfunction and food reactivity, we're dealing with challenges of restoration, recovery, repair, and inflammation, allergy reactions, and challenges with infection. Right. So honestly, when I look back on 25 years of doing nutritional based medicine, I interestingly often find that things fall into these 4 buckets, right? On everyone, I'm going to always be addressing fundamental nutrition. And I have to say, the KBMO test is a part of my wellness plan. And my patients who walk in and say, I feel awesome and I want to feel better. And my patients who are like, I am super sick, I have 14 clinical diagnoses, help me feel better, right? In both of those situations, this is going to be one of my tools to be able to move forward and create a more personalized approach for that patient. So today I want to just kind of shine the light on the couple areas of restoration. Something's broken and torn and we need to fix it. And we're having challenges defending ourselves or creating the right balance in our immunologic patterns and our immunologic recognition of the outside world and our own tissue. Right, so this is an overwhelming grid. This is a list of all the Nutridyne products that I teach in a huge conference right now, and I mentor practitioners to say, look, if you were going to start from a ground zero with nutrition and you wanted to know the most important fundamental tools in your toolbox, these are actually the ones that I teach. I should mention too, James, I was so grateful. This same $200 offer that you are all receiving, KBMO just offered to the mentorship group that I am working with down at Northwestern Health Sciences University here in Bloomington, Minnesota. So the university has a beautiful array of different students from acupuncture programs to chiropractic programs with neurology focus and peds focus. And we have a functional medicine club. We've got 80 students that come and meet with me and train with me once a month. And it was absolutely awesome. KBMO also offered this $200 rate to the student group. And it was amazing. We had, I think 40 kits go out the door, at least half of them. And I'm working with them again in June, and everybody's bringing their results back. And we're going to talk about it again. Right. And so this is kind of an anchor tool that I use in teaching supplements and teaching diet, because it's where I want to begin. And when the doctor is patient, because in my mentorship groups, the practitioners are also the patient. They're not just my peer, but they're a patient too. I'm teaching them how to start thinking their way through different formulas and tools in our toolbox that hit peak performance, help us heal tissue and recovery, help support allergy, inflammation, and metabolic balance, and then the powerful importance of gut elimination, bowel elimination, and liver and systemic detoxification. These are absolutely the powerful tools I want every one of my residents, my mentees knowing how to use, so that they carefully can pick and choose their programs when building what I call the Tower of Power. So what I like about building programs and protocols is they're not protocols. They're not cookie cutter. It's not the same thing for every single patient, right? Because I'm always starting with food first. I'm always starting with the diet base. I'm looking at food first. What foods can my patient eat? And I'm going to build their whole program off the knowledge of knowing which foods do I need to keep out of their diet, because they could cause immune compromisation and provoke inflammation. So food first, right? Then I build a layer of looking carefully at foundational fibers. I want to see fibers, phytonutrients, and probiotics, because they are critical to the quality and integrity of the gut. right? The movement of the adequate, proper carbohydrates through the system to manage endotoxins, to deal with LPS challenges, to make sure we've got the right nutrients that are in there that are anti-inflammatories and also appropriate antioxidants. And then the bugs. What are we feeding the bugs? The good gut bugs, our pre and our probiotics. Then in my own mind, in building a program, the next thing I'm going to look at is essential fatty acids. What are they eating? What is the array of quality oils, from olive oils and olives, nuts and seeds in their diet? How much are they getting CLA? Are they integrating dairy? What's happening with flax oil, fish oil, and the blends of different kinds of oils? And so I absolutely love the knowledge of knowing which oils or oil-based foods the patients might be reacting to, because I'm definitely going to use that as a navigation tool when I'm building the patient's personalized program. And then the next thing I say is, okay, so now what do I know that's wrong and what do I need to help them heal? And most of the time I'm starting in the gut. So I'm going to go to a functional food that's going to address intestinal permeability. And so I then next go into and say, literally, how can I put food in a cup? You know, like, what can I do to put powders together to feed and fuel nutrition in a cup so that we get the best healing in that GI tract quickly, and we can expedite them moving forward with a healthy anti-inflammatory and toxic reducing program. And then I step back in my functional medicine mind and say, okay, what else is going on that I've learned about this patient that we should be considering? Maybe there's blood sugar challenges, maybe endothelial challenges. Maybe I'm dealing with a long haul COVID case, right? Maybe I'm dealing with, like on and on and on, right? And then I say, what else? Right? What else is unique to this patient that I need to make sure that we're managing in this treatment plan? But where I start, food first, leverage the diet, look at KBMO, make decisions about healthy fiber, prebiotics, probiotics, and the broad range of phytonutrients, which are self-signaling, turning on and off our genetics inside of our gut. Next, answer the question, are they getting a good array of omega-3, omega-6, omega-9 oils? Do we have a good balance? What saturated fats are a part of their dietary exposure load? And then what do I need to heal? Is there something I need to replenish, replace? Do I want to work with a protein formula, a protein carb base? What might I want to do to add to that patient's recovery, restoration, and repair program? So I use a treatment plan like this, and I'm just throwing this out to you this week because where we're going to go next month, we are going to dive into programs, and I'm going to show you labs, the patient, their clinical presentation, why I chose and was using KBMO as a part of the sequence of data gathering, and how did that inform me setting up the treatment plan. So yes, the questions about can we have the deck, I am perfectly happy with my deck slides going out. As a matter of fact, I would rather people get the deck and look ahead because it seeds where we're going next. Because next, what I want to dive into next month in our session is I'm going to teach you all, what am I thinking about when I'm making those choices? You know, what fibers am I what am I going to use? Like, why and when would I choose a fruit and green in a patient? What is it going to do for the microbiome? Right, so I'm going to just share with you my favorite go-tos, the products that have not only worked so well for me in my practice, I've ended up private labeling them. And so my own private label is called Docere Vita. And so I private label about 70 products from Nutridyne and put my own label on them and sell them with not only my patient base, but out of our gym and work that we do in the fitness community. So these are some of my anchors. I love them. They are absolutely phenomenal for adding to the patient's daily dietary nutrition routine. So I work with fruits and greens because one scoop is going to replace and replenish in that patient's diet for the day the capability of what we would consume in over 20 different fruits and vegetables. So I want to see that high ORAC value. I want to support the gut healing. I want anti-inflammatories, immune modulators, and I want to see a healthy absorption in a gut that I already know is struggling. Right. So in the beginning, I love powders. It's wonderful to pour them down the GI tract and let that support heal. Right. What we're looking to do is also recover and repair and support not only the gut bug distribution, but that really important mucus, that mucin that lines not only the stomach lining, but goes on down in the small intestine. So next month, when we talk cases, I want to talk a little bit more about gastritis, how I use the tool with gastric inflammation and supporting gastric recovery. I'm going to work my way down and talk about SIBO and candidiasis and cases and how do I use the kit and other stool samples to go on and gather more data. And then what are the formulas that I use? If there was one thing that you took away from my whole entire conversation today, it's GI integrity. Literally, this is the most important formula that I use for intestinal permeability. If I had to like send a patient to a desert island and I was only allowed to give them one formula, I would probably send them with this formula because it is at the seat of healing and restoring the integrity of the GI tract. And it's upper GI, right? We're talking upper GI with this formula. So we're looking at the esophagus, we're looking at the gastric tissue, and we're looking at the small intestine. Okay, it's got a high level of priority for recovery and repair here. So when you look at this list, you're going to see the critical agents of zinc, especially zinc carnosine, which is useful in H. pylori and important for restoration of healthy, natural hydrochloric acid secretion. We see this beautiful array of some of our demulcents, leveraging the power of L-glutamine. And L-glutamine is there to repair and recover that intestinal permeability challenge. You will also see the apple pectin powder there as one of our prebiotics, right? They're soothing, healing, binding endotoxins. DGL, utilizing the deglycerinated portion of licorice or Glycyrrhiza glabra. The DGL formula is used in healing the mucus, the mucin coating and covering of that lining. Powerful for peptic ulcers, for gastric ulcers, for esophageal ulcers. When you're seeing inflammation and ulcerations in the upper part of the GI tract, your immediate go-to as a functional provider should be aloe, DGL, and glutamine, because those are the three primary things that will help us heal at inflammation, gastritis, and ulcers. I have had patients vomiting blood and use that, literally vomiting blood from ulcers, taking all the right meds and not getting the recovery that they're looking for. This heals the GI tract. It doesn't shut off the stomach acid, which is very important as a clinical sequence of events. Sometimes we definitely need to shut off that stomach acid. But the recovery process, it's not just watch and wait. This formula heals the tissue and beautifully. So I see very quick improvements within 2 to 3 days of getting used to and drinking this peach flavored, very good flavored pre and probiotic with all these demulcents and gastric tissue recovery aids. So as you scan that list, these are the best of our demulcents, and we have anti-allergy support. So I use this formula to mitigate food allergies. So this is my 2-for-1. So when I use GI integrity, I'm healing leaky gut, I'm supporting healthy microbiome, I'm targeting allergies, I'm targeting sensitivities. We're doing recovery, repair, restoration right in that upper portion of the GI tract. And that is a critical part of my avoid pattern. When they avoid the KBMO related foods, they're avoiding those foods, and we're using GI integrity. So I'm going to pause there. I'm just giving everybody sort of an inkling of where we're going to go next. I would encourage them, because I'm going to continue teaching this as we get together next month. I'm going to dig into how we can expand that repertoire. I have a ton of experience with Nutridyne products and many other companies. I do work on our advisory board. I'm the Chief Medical Education Officer here at Nutridyne, and I'm on our advisory team of Formula Creations and the Feedback Advisory Board. So I work with these products in depth. I've spent over 25 years in this industry working with different nutrition companies. I've landed here with Nutridyne because they happen to be on board with many of the lab companies that I want to work with. They've partnered here with us at KBMO. They give us tools and resources to solve problems for our patients with a lot of ease. So I will talk about cases, labs, and what did I do about it when we hit the ground running next month, James.
Perfect. No, that's a great segue into next month. So if you move on a slide, we probably have dates again, just to remind everyone when we're re-meeting.
I do. I'm going to move through some slides so they can see what I'm teaching them next time. Okay, I'm going to teach them about allergy modulation, permeability, endotoxins. How do we deal with yeast? How do we deal with pro and prebiotics? What are the different probiotics we use for the different situations? When do we use a spore probiotic? And then we're going to dive into cases. And so I'm going to leverage and talk about how the labs have all come together. I'm going to highlight what protocols did we create for that patient and why. We're going to track their data. We're going to look at labs. We're going to look at progress report, and we're going to do that over and over and over again. So that's what our next month session is going to engage.
Okay, perfect. So again, we're looking forward to that, and thanks everyone for their time today. And as I say, if anyone's got any more questions, great presentation as usual, Dr. Kristi. Thank you, James and Kristi. Perfect. Thank you for that. So the idea is, again, we'll keep going through these, and we're excited to make sure that we give you some live case studies next week and some ideas from a protocol, as well as some of the products as well. And I think that'll be very beneficial. So again, next week will be case studies. And again, we're really excited to do that. And again, then the following week will be, or months rather, will be Ask Kristi. And as we said, if you want to order the test now, do so. And then again, that'll be really a good segue into the Ask Kristi section. So again, we're excited to get that. I will get the slides from last month and this month out there along with this recording, hopefully by tomorrow morning. So that'll be my homework to go and do that. Your homework is to go online and order a test. And then you'll be in good shape for the July 13th and Ask Dr. Kristi. So Kristi, thank you again so much for your imparting your amazing knowledge and giving everyone a good overview of what's coming for next time. And again, we're very excited to get everyone on board for the next one and go through some case studies. So thank you all very much. And thank you, Kristi, in particular. Much appreciated. And thank everyone for all their questions.
Cheers, everyone. See you in a month.
Will do. Thanks, guys.